Welcome to the Mindfulness Academy Podcast. I'm your host, Aimee Morgan, and today I'm excited to introduce you to our guest, John Shepard. John is the Mindfulness Program Manager at IU Health. Welcome, John.
Thanks. Good to be here.
I believe we met sometime here within the last year or so. We were introduced by probably my favorite boss of all time, Liz Joss. Liz, if you're out there, you're awesome, and thank you for the introduction. Liz had worked at IUPUI, I believe in communications, and had come across you, and she knew about me writing The Chaos Antidote, a fable about mindfulness, a book that was published during the pandemic, actually. And knowing your work and my passion for mindfulness, she said, I think you two should hop on a call, which we did. And I just was so excited to hear about the amazing work that you're doing at IU Health. And I'm so glad that you're here so we can talk about it and learn some more about it.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good.
It's a great path here. So let's hop right in. Tell us about this role at IU Health. What does that look like?
Well, that's an interesting question because what it looks like is what it is because it hasn't really existed before, and so it's different all of the time. But what kind of drives me and helps direct me is remembering that my role is to find ways to embed mindfulness and mindfulness practices throughout the system, right? Wherever there's an opportunity, especially in the clinical setting, because patient care is what we're all about. And the more mindful, the more aware we are, the better it is for everyone, and most importantly for our patients. So yeah, it's using creativity and science and to find ways to be more aware, to be more present.
Give me an example of what that means.
Well, a great example would just be like as a nurse, I know that distraction happens, right? We get distracted. And most of the time we're distracted by thoughts, in addition to all the other distractions of being a nurse. And so just noticing that distraction when we're listening to a patient or when we're assessing a patient or when we're performing a procedure or even just starting an IV but mostly just in listening and actually just being there and listening rather than being lost in thought, right? Because that's where healing begins, I think, is by paying attention.
Beautiful. So how do you teach the nurses, doctors, staff how to be more mindful? Can you give me an example?
Right, that's difficult. Well, first I have to get their attention, right? And I try to bring the wisdom of mindfulness as close as I can to the bedside, right? Because asking doctors and nurses and other staff to come away to, say, a conference room or something, or away from the work isn't doable, right? And that's kind of been the big challenge in healthcare, is finding ways to bring these practices as close as we can to where doctors and nurses and PTs and OTs and everyone else works. And so let's see, like for one example, I like to use breath work to help to ground our attention. And so I'll just round through the hospitals, and when I see an opportunity to say, hey, let's get together, it could be 2 nurses, 3 nurses, 4, 5, 7, and just let's just connect with our breath for a few minutes. Not even a few minutes, really. It's more like 2 minutes, and just noticing what that feels like. And then, so that's kind of like the basis. And then using different practices, even just some mindful movement.
What might that be?
And just think yoga, right? So some mindful stretching, or another one, like for example, we'll do like a little bit of laughter yoga.
Oh, you got to tell me about this.
That one's tough to do, but it's very effective. because we want to be careful where you're laughing in the hospital setting. So when the setting is appropriate, I will. A good example is where you make a milkshake, and you just kind of you mix it up. This imaginary milkshake. You have milk in this hand and ice cream in here, and you mix it up. And then you kind of dump it all over yourself, right? And the whole time you're kind of, invoking a synth, not a real laugh, but kind of a fake laugh. And your body doesn't know the difference between that, right? It feels the same. And the laughter yoga isn't about making jokes or anything being funny at all. If it happens, it's great, but that's not the point. The point is to kind of invoke that feeling, or invite that feeling of relaxation and laughter, because that brings us into the present, right? And so all of these practices are designed to reconnect us with our senses in any way. The breath, noticing different colors that are available in your environment, anything we can do to just kind of have a break from the connection to thought, right? It's about taking refuge in your senses.
Sure. So I'm wondering if you might be able to guide us in that here for a few seconds, how this works, this laughter modality. Really, a lot of the focus of the Mindfulness Academy podcast is taking the concepts, the methodologies from what I call the White Tower, whatever that might be. Maybe that's mindfulness instruction on a very high level, or it could be, neuroscience and those sort of fields, and bring them down to just us everyday people, and give us the tools that we need at a moment's notice. Maybe sometimes it would be appropriate to do laughter meditation. I've actually never practiced that, and I'd love to try it.
Well, it laughter yoga, and it has to be done standing up. And
we'll mess everything up.
Yeah, we can't. I'll maybe on another podcast we can.
I love that. Okay. Right, well, okay. Everybody hears it. He's coming back.
Okay. But let me give you just an example where a sitting practice that I would do would just have people, however many members of the team, and just getting into stillness and settling into a stillness and noticing the urge to move, and see if you can resist it. Just settling, noticing the breath. And then one practice I like to do is just called like seeing red. And that's where your eyes are just relaxed but open. And what you're doing is it's almost as if you're looking out from behind your eyes. So you're not like looking at anything. You're just kind of gazing out from behind your eyes and just noticing what comes up. Because in our environment, there's a lot moving, right? And there's a lot of sounds too. And just noticing what's arising and what's falling away, right? Because anything that comes into our awareness also goes away from our awareness. And that simple practice of noticing when that happens is has the ability to ground us in stillness and just being here and being aware.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely. I know what you mean by the urge to move.
Yeah.
When I first started my mindfulness practice, I describe it as feeling like I wanted to crawl out of my skin. I just sincerely felt so uncomfortable sitting. At this moment in my life, I'm a business owner, I'm an author, I'm launching a podcast here, and have a couple younger kids. I just felt like I needed to constantly be on the go to keep everything afloat, right? Now obviously married, have all the, family joys and responsibilities. My life was full right now, and it felt very difficult to be present. I noticed a very strong urge to reach for my phone. I'm sure you hear of that a lot. I don't know if that's something that that you've had to deal with as well, or if you notice that a lot in your practice with others, that is a concern that comes up. The holster, as I sometimes call it. Reaching for the holster.
Absolutely. Obviously, our society, our culture, especially over the last few years, we even before the pandemic, distracted. Somewhat addicted to stimulus, right? And that's just the way it is. I have doubts whether that's a good way to live, to be constantly stimulated. So people are bringing that into the healthcare system, right? Because this is the way we are. So
Sure.
it's really even more important that we notice that that's difficulty in centering our attention, focusing our awareness, and getting still. Because the reason stillness is important is because a lot of times when we try to focus our awareness, the mind doesn't want to get on board. There's too much other, way more interesting things to think about in the future or in the past than just what's right here, right?
Sure.
And we're focused on what's coming or what it's been. So one way to kind of sort of trick the mind is let the body lead, right?
Okay.
So in mindfulness training, we learn never let the mind lead the body. Always allow the body to lead the mind, which is difficult. And what that means is leading with your senses.
Okay. Talk more about that.
Well, what are the senses? Sight, hearing, smell, touch, taste. At any given moment, if you want to be present, if you want to be there, notice what you're, for example, noticing the cool air move across your skin. Well, in order to do that, I have to be present, right? I can't be thinking about much. I'm just coming back into the body, noticing sounds. I mean, that's the one I like best. If I want to get still, just sit down and noticing what sounds are coming to my attention, and just for a brief shining moment, I am present. Very quickly, the mind will flood it back in. But the more that you practice that, the more you can make that time longer where you're actually present. And so sometimes it's, you start with sounds, and then you might move to smells, and then you might move to, bodily sensations, internal and external. All of those are practices to bring you into the present moment. And that's what the goal is in working in the hospital setting, presence.
Excellent.
It's about taking refuge in your senses, really. Because up here is great, but often kind of a wilderness.
That's a good way to say it. And we'll get back to the wilderness here in a minute, because I know you just got back from a trip, and we'll talk about that wilderness. I want to talk more about that. I'm curious what it looks like for patient care. How does that situation work for teaching mindfulness? Do you
patients? Yeah. Well, that's a challenge, because the patients, if they're seeing us, if they're with us, whether it be inpatient or in a clinic, there's issue. They have some sort of issue, right? It's a health issue, and so you have to be careful not to say, "Well, we're going to teach you how to be mindful." That's not really going to serve very well. And so it's more important. It's more about finding out where they're at. Tell me about your breathing. How does it feel to breathe? Tell me about your sleep patterns. Tell me about what you lean into when things get, kind of rocky. What's your go-to to help you find presence, to settle down, right? And so we listen to them. Especially in one of the clinics is the ICU survivor clinic where I work, and these are patients who have been, especially during COVID, had been in the ICU for a long period of time, and had probably been on a ventilator and maybe sedated for at least a week, and other life-saving measures to keep them alive. And those patients, even the research shows, even up to 2 or 3 years, can still be struggling with symptoms of PTSD from that experience, because it was so traumatic. And so that's just one example of the patient population that we work with. Another one is, I work in the cardiovascular rehab unit, where patients who have had a heart attack or other types of cardiac event, and they're doing their rehab to rebuild their heart and rebuild their lungs and muscles. And the research shows that mindfulness and meditation actually can help improve like their heart rate variability, which helps them kind of engage the parasympathetic system rather than the sympathetic fight or flight. And so mindfulness is all about parasympathetic and just noticing rest, noticing the breath, and being able to regulate, right? Instead of just being in a state of dysregulation and just going all the time, which is where most of us are. And this helps them get into more just, and of course the breath is the king or queen, however you want to look at it. You know,
We'll go with queen on the show.
Yeah, let's do that.
So if you have a patient at IU Health, do you give them the option, hey, we have a mindfulness manager who could talk to you a little bit, or are you just kind of on the wings and doctors say, hey, could you come in and talk with somebody?
Yeah,
I think
right.
that could be helpful.
Because it is new, and because I'm a nurse, a lot of our staff, especially at the downtown hospitals, know that mindfulness and meditation helps, and we use our communication system, and I'll get pages and requests, hey, we have a patient who's really struggling with this, with a particular, with what's going on. Would you come and kind of just work with them?
Sure.
And so there's where I go and just kind of meet with the patient. And luckily, as a nurse, I can make assessments and read the chart and see, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Because, asking someone to meditate who, you just have to be careful about who you ask to close their eyes. It's not always, doesn't feel safe.
Sure.
So it's really important to know, to be certified in mindfulness and know what's appropriate and what's not.
So the burning question for me is, how has COVID impacted your mindfulness services within the walls of the hospital?
Right. It's interesting because it's really helped us in a strange way become more aware of the need to be present.
How so?
Well, because I think we would all agree that COVID has heightened everything, right? Heightened our sense of anxiety, heightened our fear, our reactivity, all of it. It's kind of triggered everybody. And triggeredness is not something you want in healthcare. And so I think a lot of people in healthcare realize, this is more important than ever now to recognize emotional states, negative mind states, distraction, feelings of fear and anxiety and sadness, right? And so mindfulness obviously helps us become more aware of those feelings in our body. And so, if anything, regarding the pandemic and mindfulness, it's actually increased the awareness of the importance of noticing what's going on inside.
Sure.
Because it's a tough time to be in healthcare right now.
And I think one of the biggest gifts of mindfulness to me is helping me become more responsive instead of reactive, instead of have that knee-jerk reaction, to learn to take a moment, to a cleansing breath even sometimes can be all it needs, that between the stimulus and the response, there is that choice, there is that space, and trying to claim that space to show up as my best self.
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. I want to talk a little bit about your background, because I think that's fascinating, your journey to mindfulness. And I would love for you to go clear back to college. Where'd you go to college? Where are you from?
So I'm from Chicago. My first college degree was not in nursing. I worked in the insurance business in Chicago for my first 15 years of my career. It wasn't until much later in my life when I realized that I wanted to do something else, and I wanted to become a nurse.
You got to tell me about that. Why nursing? That feels like a pretty
Yeah,
large
I know.
jump.
Yeah,
So
it was. Yeah. I think I always wanted to be in healthcare. It's just that I didn't think I could do it. I wasn't the best at math, and so it kind of just intimidated me. And it wasn't until I was in my late 30s where I was like, maybe I could do it. And so I did.
wow. So you started your nursing. You started college for nursing.
Yeah, I
In your
went
late
back.
30s.
I went back to college. My wife said, "Go do what you need to do, and she'll support us for a while." And so she did. And I went back to Marion College here in Indianapolis, and became a nurse and nursing student and all that. And that's how it kind of all began. And so I'd been practicing as a nurse for about 16 years. Before that's when I started practicing meditation in the clinical setting for me.
ICU.
Yeah, I was in the ICU, and just realizing my stress level was very high, my distraction was high, reactivity high. I just kind of felt like I was losing myself a little bit, and so that's when I started bringing like my phone and a little speaker into the ICU, and before work, I would clock in, and then for about 5 or 10 minutes, I would sit down in a space in our ICU and just listen to this meditation to help me notice what I'm bringing into work. Where's my mind at? Where's my heart at? And
Did you notice a difference after doing that?
yeah, totally.
How so?
I just felt more present. Like it kind of opened up a window. Like you can actually see what you're doing. Where you're coming from instead of just being dragged around. That was the big thing for me. I was like, wow, I didn't know I had control over this. That I could actually see how I'm feeling and notice that it's just kind of was ghosts and shadows. Like noticing like, well, I'm afraid. Well, what am I afraid of?
Naming it. I mean, that gives you a lot of power over the situation, just to name it.
Yeah, notice my fear, my reactivity, all of that, and realize, none of that was really based in fact. And that was the big kind of opened up for me. It's like, wow, look at all this reactivity and how unnecessary and unhelpful it was for me and for everyone who worked around me. And so that's when I started gaining a lot of attention, and I was awarded National Magnet Nurse of the Year, which is a big recognition from the American Nurses Association. And so
when was that?
That was in 2017. So that was a big award. And when we came back from the national conference, IU Health said, look, we want you to get certified in mindfulness and meditation, and we want you to share these practices with others. So which was great and beautiful, and not a lot of healthcare organizations have done that. I don't know of any.
And you think more should?
Was that?
Do you think more should?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I'm sure that they're trying in different ways, but getting nurses or any healthcare individual who works, is patient-facing and works with other team members, definitely to help the team be more focused and more aware of what they're bringing to the environment. It's hard to argue with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that journey with us. I'm curious, does your wife also practice with you? Is that something you guys share?
Yeah. She's a CPA actually, but she now is also a yoga teacher, and she's very much into yoga, and she has her own meditation practice, and that's great. And we remind each other, when we're not being mindful.
Oh, that's handy.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe sometimes annoying.
It definitely helps. I think our relationship, definitely.
One of my goals for the Mindfulness Academy podcast is to equip our listeners with mindfulness tools in every episode. So when they listen, they can walk away and hopefully pick up one more tool to put into their mindfulness tool belt that they could use today. That's my goal. I'm wondering if you would be so kind as to share one of your go-to mindfulness practices that you use in the clinical setting.
Yeah. I like to keep it simple. and we only have a couple minutes usually in the clinical setting. So if I have a group of nurses or other clinicians around, the one I like to do is just a simple breath awareness, because the beauty of a breath awareness practice is that the breath is always here. It's always a good idea to notice your breathing and how you're breathing, and it's a good centering practice. Now, of course, it's important that people understand that when we practice meditation, especially when we bring our awareness to our breath, our mind might have other plans. And so when you notice that your attention has gone away, that's kind of like that's kind of like that's the important moment to notice, oh, a distraction is here, and then coming back without judgment, without criticism, without any of that. And of course you'll do it, and that's okay, but just coming back. So in any meditation practice, just first notice what it feels like if you're sitting, to feel that sitting is, like this. This is what it feels like to sit.
Eyes open or closed?
Whatever feels right for you. If your eyes are open, just a soft gaze, like to the floor or your lap. And let the shoulders kind of fall away from the ears. Maybe notice cool air moving across your skin. And then I like to just notice whatever it is that's supporting me here, in this case, a chair. And now just bring your attention, your awareness to the physical sensation of the breath moving in and out. Now in this practice, it's really helpful as the breath is moving in to just kind of silently say to yourself, in. And then on the exhalation, track the exhalation along until the very last sensation, and then just one. Again, in. Two. When you get to 10, simply start over. When you get distracted, which you will, notice the distraction and just come back. Start over. And sometimes if it's helpful, if counting doesn't work, then just this breath. Another. This breath. So that's kind of the practice. It's just a simple breath awareness where we're just bringing your attention, noticing when it gets distracted, and coming back. You do that about 1,000,000 times.
Well, thank you for leading us in that, John.
No
I definitely feel more relaxed. I wonder if my voice even sounds different. I feel different.
It is interesting what happens even through just a short period of time.
There were a couple of other things I wanted to ask you here before the end. I know we're getting close to time. You recently came back from a week-long experience in mindfulness. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what that was like. What was it?
It was called Awake in the Wild. It's a week-long retreat in the wilderness. It's put on by one of the teachers from the Mindfulness Training Institute, Mark Coleman, and who's an expert in teaching mindfulness in the wilderness. So it's a silent retreat, week-long.
How many people?
There were 30 people there. I didn't know any of them.
And where were you?
We were in the Rocky Mountains.
Okay.
And last year, the one I did was in Baja, Mexico. So
can I just remind you that you have the coolest job?
Yeah. So it's I don't know if you've ever been on a silent retreat, but it's very.
Use the word full.
I did full. Yeah, full.
Unpack that for us. What does that mean?
It's kind of like, do you know how like when you're sitting around your house and the refrigerator stops running, like that motor, that sound, and you notice, wow, that's been going the whole time and I didn't notice it. That's kind of what happens, but you realize it's your mind that's been going.
Wow.
And so.
How long does it take you to unfurl?
It takes me about 4 days.
4 days? Yeah. Okay.
I really don't really feel not comfortable. You're constantly thinking. You realize because you're not talking, the mind kind of takes over, right? And this incessant thinking that's happening is very powerful. You're making judgments and opinions about absolutely everything, and it's kind of in your face, right? And you also notice the urge that you really want to talk to people. That was hard. It's like, you see all these interesting people, and you want to. Some people like, I really want to talk to them and find out what their story is. I don't really have that so much because I don't know. That's not. I mean, I enjoy silence. So it's just whatever comes up for you.
Any lessons you took away from that?
It's interesting. You people, like on the final night of the retreat, we kind of come out of silence very slowly, and people ask,
"What does that mean? Come out of silence very slowly?"
Because we're listening throughout the week. We're listening to talks from the teacher. There's teaching that goes on throughout the retreat. Insight that he's learned, and so when you come out of silence slowly, you're just encouraged to if you have anything to say that you want to talk about, how was your experience, right? And so that way, because it could be jarring, like all of a sudden, like you're silent for a week, and the next thing you know, you're in a crowded airport. That could be really
a shock to the system.
Yeah, right. So
and it was full in that there were some interesting natural experiences you said that happened during the time too. Tell us about that.
Well, it was springtime in the Rockies, which I've never been in the Rockies during springtime, but like the first 2 days, the wind was
in a tent. You need to say you're in a tent.
I was in a tent, yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not really a camper. The only time I get in the tent is when I go on these retreats. So
that's brave.
Yeah, I know. So the wind was super, super strong during the first 2 days, day and night, and which is beautiful because the wind was such a constant reminder of, wake up, Kind
of a bell.
Yeah. It didn't really care what we were trying to do. And that was beautiful for me. Being in nature is what that retreat is all about, and using nature to remind us that we're no different than the trees or the ground or the water or the wind. We're all one, right? It really gets into that, noticing, you could see the snow melting from the Rockies coming down through the river, and we were, I was anyway, drinking right out of the river because it was snow melt. And just feeling like, and then, I go and pee it out and it goes back into the ecosystem, right? Yeah. And noticing my, connection to nature that's just one example, but yeah.
Some lightning Yes.
Yeah, lightning storm came at night, and it was
Flooding? Was there flooding too?
well, the river because it rained or it snowed up in the mountains and increased the amount of water coming down. This little creek that was near us, the stream really, broke over its banks, and I didn't really notice it until the next morning. I woke up and I was like, oh well, maybe I should.
My socks are floating.
No, luckily it wasn't. It didn't get near my tent, but it definitely got closer, and so. Yeah, noticing my reactivity to that too, like how I wanted to freak out, even though there was really nothing to freak out about. So anyway, when I say full, it just means like it's just realize how triggered I was just going into the retreat and how I stayed triggered,
For 4 days.
For 4 days before finally, okay, I can relax now a little bit. And so finally, the last thing on the last day of the retreat, the teacher said, so congratulations, we finished the first week of retreat. What he was saying was, now take it into the second week, into your life.
Sure. Yeah.
And stay in this mind state, in this abiding awareness, right? Which of course I didn't. I tried to. I think it lasted. I got into the Denver airport. Got on the airplane. That was cool, Didn't get until 2 a.m. I was still kind of felt good. And then the next day you just realize this, you're getting pulled out of it and just kind of trying to stay there. So I still feel about 20%. So that's good.
That's good.
Yeah.
I consider that a win.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got to go back on retreat.
I like the way you think. I am wondering if you could share with us a little bit about the impact of your work. We're kind of going back to your work for just a moment here, because I love this visual of how your work is influencing the healthcare system. Can you give us an example of that? Some either qualitative or quantitative or story.
Yeah, right.
What would be?
Yeah, we are doing research on the effect of this, the impact that it has.
Okay. I'd be interested to hear more about that. Maybe on the next time. There we go.
So on a anecdotal, like one of the practices that I really like is when I round on different units and I see an opportunity to bring people together to practice some form of embodiment, right? I mentioned before, like I practice it like a 2-minute laughter yoga, right? Which is mindfulness, right? And it's a meditation, and it's an awareness, and it's bringing people together, and it gets people to notice their state, right? Their physical and emotional state. And without exception, whenever I leave a group, I hear words like, well, I didn't always hear, can you please come back? And then I also hear, as I'm walking away, I can hear whoever it was, physicians, nurses, whomever, talking. And it seems like every time I hear, wow, I feel so much better. I didn't realize how uptight I felt or how stressed I was, And it's like, that's it. See, that's what I want to be noticing, how triggered we are. And it seems like without exception, each time I hear that come out, like, I didn't realize.
That's amazing.
And they don't say it to me, they just say it out to the universe, right?
That's amazing. And you provide ongoing training. Is it a daily practice or a weekly practice via Zoom that some of your folks can, the clinicians can dial into,
we have you can call a telephone number and listen to 5 different meditations. We also have daily meditation that's available. And a 5-week training in mindfulness class that I teach.
On demand, or is that?
I offer it, and then they fill up, and then we're done. So it's,
how much time does this take?
It's 5 weeks.
Like an hour a day, or
90 minutes a week. Should be 2 hours, but we got to, whittle it down to make it, doable for people with busy schedules. And then I also do retreats. That's the big one that's come up lately. Is I do half day and full day retreats where we practice mindfulness. We practice noticing emotional states. We practice breathing exercises. We do yoga. We do not any fancy yoga, but simple yoga, and then also myofascial release. Just so it's just a lot of resting and noticing. So yeah, so all kinds of different practices.
John, I'm wondering if you might be able to share with us an anecdote of an instance where you were able to help a patient who was struggling, maybe with some big emotions or some major medical issues, and how your mindfulness, what you did, and what the result of that was.
Right. Yeah. So the one that comes to mind was just actually a couple weeks ago in our ICU survivor clinic, where some of those patients are suffering symptoms of, among other things, PTSD or
some from COVID.
Yeah, they're also, we'll have COVID. Yeah, the PTSD from being, on a ventilator for, at least a week, or other life-saving ICU measures that can be traumatic for anyone to go through, especially being on a ventilator. So these patients come back and we work with them and with their physical symptoms, like shortness of breath or other symptoms, but I work with them in more of the area of working with relaxation and emotional regulation, things like that. And so this one patient that we were working with, he
can you give us the age so we can kind of have a little visual there?
Yeah, it was young man, actually, a young father, who, when talking with him about how he was, just kind of going through his life now from the day-to-day experience, he was having trouble just sort of relaxing, and which is understandable.
Because he's in the ICU.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And just feeling on edge a lot. Anyway, so I just did a simple stillness practice with him, just finding a way to settle into stillness and then connect with the breath, like similar to the one we just did. Mm-hmm. And he did have breathing issues, but I was able to notice some, like where he was breathing and look at his breathing mechanics. And I kind of noticed that he was doing a lot of chest breathing, which doesn't really lend itself.
Doesn't lend itself to
relaxation.
Sure.
Or focus or anything. It's just it's a triggered way to breathe. And so I introduced him to belly breathing or abdominal breathing, and we practiced it together.
Do you do the hand on the belly?
Yeah, hand on the belly, hand on the chest, and just kind of see if you can get the belly moving more. And by doing that, also you're recruiting more lung space too, which I don't think he understood, but was important because given the injury that his lung had sustained during COVID, there was all this extra lung space that wasn't being utilized. And once we started looking into and practicing abdominal breathing or belly breathing, he actually kind of felt like, whoa, I could actually get a deeper breath. And so amazing. I felt, so I worked with him, and then, so I came out of the room, and our next team member, who I think was with pharmacy or maybe social work, went in and talked to him and worked with him. And then when she came out, she said, because we all kind of debrief in a conference room, and she said that patient said that since he's left the hospital, anything that other people have told him, that was the most useful thing that anyone has ever told him about how to finding ways to, relax and breathe. And that kind of, I'm sure you can imagine, that kind of made me feel like an important member of the team, and we were making a contribution. So everyone else on the team does super important work as well. So yeah, stuff like that. It's just noticing people, helping people understand that, like I did, that there is another way. Right?
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It's exciting to think about how mindfulness has the opportunity to even impact not only our mental well-being, but even our physical well-being to lean into breathing better.
Right.
If you've had some sort of injury, or just what that might even do for other parts of our body if we are breathing well, sending oxygen to the places that need to heal.
Right. That's what, and so there's a sweet spot, like a combination of, Western and Eastern medicine.
Okay.
That's really
talk about that.
Well, that's really what, in the West here, we tend to treat disease.
Right.
Right. Rather than, and find ways to prevent illness as well. But mindfulness is, let's be honest, it's an Eastern-based practice that is now being more widely accepted. And so finding how it complements Western medicine is really what we're trying to do here, because it does complement it. They complement each other very well. So, yeah.
I will say anecdotally for me, the Eastern and Western, how that has impacted my own life is several years ago, I was in a car accident, and I received a lot of physical therapy, which seemed honestly in a lot of ways like Western medicine. And the interesting part to me though was that when I had wrapped up my stint with physical therapy, my physical therapist said, I would highly recommend you continue with yoga. I thought, well, okay, fine, I'll do that. And this was, 16 years ago. And what I realized when I started doing yoga was that I was paying too much for physical therapy because it was all yoga.
Right.
It sincerely was, and it has helped a lot over these last several years to keep things from wanting to lock up. It's really been a blessing to me and my body. So
yeah, yoga is wonderful. I love it. And so many benefits. I'm 150 years old, but you can't tell because of yoga.
Well, thanks for the tip.
Yeah, right.
So do it more often. The last thing I'd like to do, if you would be so interested, would be to wrap up our time here together by practicing the Glowy daily reflection practice. And this is something that it's an original practice that I developed and use as my daily practice as part of that. And I've included that in my book, The Chaos Antidote, and in the accompanying workbook, because I feel so strongly that it helps connect me to myself before I start the day. I just feel, even if I just have 5 minutes, I feel more centered by writing this out. It also can be something that you can speak, which is what we'll do today. Would you be willing to join me in that?
Of course.
Wonderful.
Anytime.
Thanks for being a good sport, John.
Love it.
So Glowy is an acronym. And the first, I'll tell you what each of the letters are, and then we'll practice it. We'll let you give us your responses. So the G stands for grateful, what we're grateful for. I think a lot of great practices start with that. The L stands for lift up, the things in our lives that need resources, support, the things that may be weighing us down a little bit. The O is for what you observe, as in the mindfulness practice of noticing what's going on inside and around you. Mm-hmm. The W is for wholesome intention. So how you intend to show up in this moment, how you intend to show up in life. And the Y is my favorite. You end the practice with a positive affirmation about yourself. So the Y stands for you are. And sometimes when I do this, I'll even kind of give myself a little hug. Sometimes I'm even looking in the mirror just to kind of affirm myself before I head out into my day. Give myself a little bit of a pep talk before I head out the door. So let's dive right in. Tell me a little bit about what you're grateful for. And it can be one thing, or it could be 5 things, whatever is comfortable to you.
I'm just grateful to be alive, to be able to participate in the world.
That's a beautiful one.
Yeah. Tell
me something that needs lifted up, maybe needs resources or support.
In my life, right?
Or it could be in the world.
Yeah, love. I feel like, or let's just say kindness. I feel like practicing kindness for me is super important.
Need more of that in the world.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah. And I usually miss the opportunity when it comes along. I see an opportunity to be kind and I didn't do it. And so then I practice it. I try to next time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, you want to be more mindful of being
being kind, yeah, of doing something for someone else.
Beautiful. What is something that you observe inside or around you?
That needs work?
Doesn't have to
Yeah.
be.
Something I observe a lot is my my ability to react to anything rather than just kind of let things come and go.
Okay. And you even noticed that maybe even today there are moments where you've reacted instead of responded
Absolutely,
or
yeah.
let it roll.
I generally walk around in a state of reactivity, so noticing when I don't, and practicing non-reactivity. Yeah.
Beautiful. What is your wholesome intention, John?
My wholesome intention is just to be present. I mean, just practice mindfulness, practice just being here over and over and over and over again, right?
That's often mine in the
Yeah.
morning. Is my wholesome intention is to show up. Sometimes it's I want to be present during this coffee meeting I have, or
Right.
I want to be present when I pick up my kids and hear about their day. And so the beautiful thing about being present is it renews. Every second, there's another opportunity. Oh, okay.
Right.
Deep breath. I can be present now. Maybe I wasn't 5 seconds ago, but I can be present now.
And
And that's
it's
what matters, right? You just
right.
practice. Medicine is practice. Mindfulness is practice. It's because it's a continual improvement and trying.
Yeah, and what's funny is it's our natural state, right? This is how I was born. It shouldn't be that hard to fall into this natural state. So going back to that natural state of presence is what it's all about, really.
Absolutely. And the last one, my favorite, you get to brag on yourself. You get to love on yourself a little bit, John. You are.
Enough. I like that. You are enough.
Absolutely.
You're imperfect and still enough.
John, it's been a complete pleasure having you on this show today. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your journey, what you're up to at IU Health, the impact that your work is having. Thank you for doing that important work, and thank you for joining us.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for the Mindfulness Academy podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Good Aim Communications. Good Aim Communications is a full-service marketing firm that serves clients in the housing, service, and renewable energy sectors. If you'd like to learn more, visit goodaimcommunications.com. If you'd like to learn more about the Mindfulness Academy podcast, please visit mindfulnessacademy.us. Please also be sure to subscribe to our Mindfulness Academy podcasts through whichever service that you listen to. You can also access it through mindfulnessacademy.us. From my heart to yours, may you live with ease. This is your host, Aimee Morgan, signing off.